what if that one bullet missed? John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, Julius Caesar. 4 men, 4 centuries, and every time it came down to less than an inch. So how different would the world you live in be from the one where that inch went the other way? I'm going to show you, one story at a time. November 22nd, 1963, Dallas, Texas. A motorcade moves slowly through Dealey Plaza. Shots ring. Within the hour, the 35th President of the United States is dead. But say the bullet missed. Say Kennedy ducked, or the angle was just slightly different. He survives Dallas, finishes his term, and very likely wins a second.
Schedule's clear until the security briefing at 3, sir.
Vietnam doesn't become the war that defined a generation. Kennedy had already started questioning America's commitment there. Advisors were reassessing. Strategies were being debated behind closed doors. A second term gives him room to pull back before the jungle swallows half a generation of young Americans. Civil rights moves differently too. Kennedy had been cautious, publicly supportive, but careful not to provoke the southern wing of his own party. Without the need to run again, he goes further. Maybe the Civil Rights Act becomes his legacy, not the man who took office after he died. He'd already stared down Khrushchev over Cuba and won, but only barely. That kind of fear doesn't invite a repeat. Fewer standoffs, a slower arms race. And the space program he pushed so hard for keeps climbing. The moon isn't the finish line, it's a waypoint toward Mars. And maybe the strangest difference of all, there's no grainy film replayed in slow motion for 60 years. No magic bullet theory. No decades-long argument about a grassy knoll. Trust in government doesn't fracture in front of the entire country. Not yet, anyway. But that's not the biggest change of all. April 4th, 1968, Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King Jr. steps out onto the balcony of the Lorraine Motel.
Tell him not to forget the tie.
A single shot. He's pronounced dead about an hour later.
Time of death, 7:05 p.m.
Now say that shot misses. By 1968, the civil rights movement was already splintering. Some pulling toward nonviolence, others toward black power. King's death cemented that fracture. If he lives, he might have held the center, bridging a movement that was already pulling itself apart. He'd also shifted his focus that year, away from race alone toward economic justice. His Poor People's Campaign aimed to unite Americans across racial lines around poverty and inequality. That agenda terrified the establishment more than his civil rights demands ever did.
This war is draining the blood of the nation, and we will not be silent.
If he lives, that campaign gains real traction. He'd also turned hard against the war in Vietnam, calling his own government the world's greatest purveyor of violence. Survive, and that voice only grows louder, a moral anchor for the anti-war movement that the government can't simply discredit. The backlash would be just as real. The FBI was already watching him, and surviving an assassination attempt wouldn't have made them ease off. It likely makes the surveillance worse. But the 1970s looked different. More black mayors, more governors, more members of Congress, years ahead of schedule. He becomes someone who keeps growing, keeps adapting, not a name frozen at 39 years old. But the real shock comes next. April 14th, 1865, Ford's Theater, Washington.
Extra! The war is over! Lee surrendered to Grant!
John Wilkes Booth fires a single shot into the back of Abraham Lincoln's head.
Now he belongs to the ages.
He dies the next morning, just 5 days after the Civil War effectively ends. Now imagine the shot goes wide. Reconstruction doesn't get handed off to Andrew Johnson, a man far softer on the defeated South. It stays in Lincoln's hands, steady and far more deliberate. He pushes the 14th and 15th Amendments with real force, not foot-dragging, and backs the Freedmen's Bureau with actual muscle behind it. When Southern legislatures start writing laws to recreate slavery in everything but name, they're stopped immediately, not years later. That doesn't mean racism vanishes or that resistance disappears, but it needs a far firmer response. Maybe federal troops stay longer. Maybe the Klan doesn't rise unchecked for over a decade. Maybe voting rights arrive earlier and actually hold. And because the message comes from the same man who freed the enslaved and held the Union together through 4 years of war, it carries weight no successor could match. The country might still face its racial reckoning, just decades sooner, and with far less room to look away. But the last story doesn't have such a simple answer. March 15th, 44 BC, a Senate meeting inside the Curia of Pompey in Rome. A group of senators, including Brutus, a man Caesar treated like a son, surround him and stab him 23 times. He bleeds out at the foot of a statue of Pompey, the rival he defeated years before. Now say the daggers stay sheathed. Caesar was already dictator for life, quietly stacking the Senate with loyalists. If he lives, he almost certainly makes it official. Rome shifts from a republic to an empire under his own hand, not after his death. What follows is a smoother transition. No power vacuum, no civil war between Mark Antony and Octavian, no purges to clean up the mess. A longer peace, faster infrastructure, maybe even a push east into Parthia that never had the chance to happen. But here's the twist. The men who killed Caesar told themselves they were saving the Republic from a king. Instead, within a few years, Rome got an emperor anyway, Augustus, a man with far less patience for sharing power than Caesar ever showed. The assassination didn't stop the thing it was meant to stop. It just delayed it and arguably made it worse. 4 men, 4 bullets, 4 different versions of the world we never got to see. But Caesar's story leaves a harder question hanging over all of it. If killing him only sped up the very thing his killers feared, was the bullet that missed really the better outcome? Whose bullet do you wish had missed? Or do you think the world you're living in right now only exists because they didn't?
Dodal History, the parts your textbook skipped.